All right. Welcome everyone to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen. This is sponsored by Seller Labs, the software for new sellers to get hooked in and done everything correctly on Amazon. I have Jamin Arvig. Is that correct? Did I say it right this time? All right. So Jamin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here, Will.
All right. So as we jump in here, Jamin, the first question I like to ask all the guests is, why would a seller, an e-commerce seller who's interested in monetizing their mental capital, why would they be interested in hearing from you?
For me, monetizing mental capital was something that I was not looking to do. And it was something I came to reluctantly. And the reason is I was doing very well with our teams, building brands, buying brands. And you can build a lot of success with others when you're focused on that. If we're just focused on someone else's brand, it can distract us. So I was very reluctant on doing that. So it took time to open my mind that maybe I should do that. So when others came to us asking for help, we eventually decided, yeah, we would help. But I wanted to make sure we could do it in a way where we had differentiators. There's so many people doing this. We want to make sure that we've got a reason to exist, a reason for others to actually need us.
Okay.
And so once we felt we had something like that, we could figure out a framework where it could be possible.
So, okay, I love that. It sounds like you've done the whole build a brand thing successfully. Tell me about some of that experience.
Sure. Well,
like on your own for yourself, correct?
Right. So I don't know where your audience is in this. I imagine there's a lot of Amazon sellers that are
all across the board. So anything you can imagine, e-commerce, a lot of Amazon sellers, a lot of Shopify guys.
Okay. So we started in 2001. So it's been quite a while. And at that point,
like before dirt was created, when you consider this industry.
Correct. Around the same time. And so there was so much happening, so much change, so much need of infrastructure. There really wasn't infrastructure. So in some ways it was easier because there was less competition, but much harder because there was no infrastructure. And so we had a very different world back then than we do now. But we started with search engine optimization and helped go up to Google rankings quickly in different areas. So we built brands and had very good success. So we were in the internet retailer, top 100 at the time. So 500 at the time. So one of the top 500 sites in the world selling products.
Okay.
And we kept adding channels and traffic campaigns in every different channel possible for traffic. Mm-hmm. And then marketplaces appeared, we kept adding all of those. So we really became a multi-channel reseller because we started when we did.
Interesting. So you originally in your journey in building a brand back in 2001, as you kind of looked into that, SEO became a key part of your play. And were you listing these products on Amazon and then getting them to rank on Google, or were you listing them on something like Shopify or WooCommerce?
This is before all of that.
Shopify 2001. I don't think that jives.
Yeah, even Amazon. I mean, Amazon was really selling proprietary methods, proprietary relations. Like they had a Toys R Us partnership. That was one of their big things. I mean, this was a long time ago. And so a lot of folks could not sell their stuff through Amazon yet. So it didn't apply. They were very focused on books and focused on getting funds raised so they wouldn't die back then. So we were focused on Google and SEO on Google. And back then, there weren't blogs or videos or anything about how to do it. So everyone was kind of on their own trying to figure out, what's the best way to optimize keywords and go up in the ranking. So some of the principles do apply to how a lot of folks are now optimizing with keywords on Amazon for SEO purposes within the Amazon platform. But that's really how we started.
Interesting. So you began that journey kind of looking at how to connect those different dots, figured out how to scale. And obviously the landscape has changed dramatically since then in terms of what's there, but I'm sure some of those same principles that you learned back then managed. And then you mentioned you were reluctant. Tell me about that.
Yes.
Like you obviously had found some success for yourself, and others were coming to you naturally and saying, hey, can you help me out with this? You've obviously figured this out. And by the way, I'd be happy to pay you. I'm sure some of them were saying that. And you were like, I don't know if I want to get into that game. What was it that made you reluctant?
A couple of reasons for my reluctance. One was we had scaled well. So we had gone in one brand from 0 to 50 million pretty quickly. Another brand 0 to 25. We were growing other brands that we were buying. So we weren't starting at 0, but we were growing those. And so part of the reason was really why would I take my eye off the ball, so to speak, right? That was probably the biggest reason. And when we're building good value with an awesome team, why would we try something else? So I think that was probably the biggest reason. And then secondly, I frankly didn't have experience in it. I think that was the second reason, having a service business. And I knew how to sell stuff, products, that is, but not services.
Interesting. So, I mean, in many ways, what you just described is exactly, I think a lot of sellers that I talk to, they get into this mode of like, I do want to diversify my portfolio here. I do want to find a product that's not based on inventory, at least physical inventory, but I have similar concerns to what you're describing, right? Like I'm not sure how to sell a service. I don't know how to scale a service. I don't know how to, all of those different things. So I think your journey is going to be interesting to explore a little bit here for some of these sellers because they're having the same thoughts and doubts about what's there. So we're going to rewind here for just a second. And Jamin, tell me about the first time where you monetized mental capital. So like we're going back, lemonade stand, selling, my daughter's she's currently making chapstick and selling it. So it just depends on where you're at. What is it that drives you to, or drove you early and maybe not early? Tell me about that. When do you remember first monetizing mental capital?
Depends how we define mental capital, but if it is in selling information, selling processes.
Sometimes the early stories are like lemonade. So my daughter, I was just saying this on the last podcast episode, she made $120 one time selling like lemonade on the corner, like in a day. She split it up 4 ways between her friends and everything. She was selling charm. She wasn't selling lemonade because she had people paying like $20 for a cup sometimes just because she was so charming with what's there. So we kind of blur the lines a little bit when we're the mental version of capital early in our life.
No problem. I think back then when I was in that stage, and right now we've got 5 young kids. Actually, one is just turning 4 and the oldest is 14. So between that range, we got 5 kids and they do some of these things too. It's a lot of fun to see. And they're getting better and better at it. But there's a program called juniorpresidents.org that I've been involved with because it's so great to help these kids with leadership and entrepreneurship skills. But when I first got into that, I was quite young too. It was before kindergarten. I don't know if I suppose about 5 years old. And there was a friend in the neighborhood. And apparently, I don't remember all the details, but apparently we started making and selling rulers to the neighbors. He sold rulers and I did too. Mine were way better. He used sticks and didn't really mark the sticks very well. Mine were perfectly marked, but we both sold the same amount, I think. But anyway, it was a good lesson, differentiation. So, but I was always selling things as a kid and just enjoying.
Hey, wait a minute. Hold on. Selling rulers?
Rulers. There were sticks. We didn't have a lot of assets to work with, but there were some woods behind our homes. And so there were lots of sticks on the ground.
So like a 2x4 kind of thing.
More like a twig, actually.
Okay. So you had a twig. And you carved the numbers on it or what? Like how?
Well, I think we just whittled it down and marked it. It wasn't a scalable business, probably will. We had a few customers and it was fun. So did art, did lots of little things.
Okay, wait. So hold on. I always like to dig into this a little bit just because I think it's super fun. Wood in the backyard, ruler. How did do you remember how you got from like, I bet I could turn that into a ruler and sell it.
Maybe you are triggering a memory. For some reason, my parents said something about money apparently around that time. And so my sales pitch to the first neighbors, apparently, my parents reminded me of this later, was my parents have zero monies. So will you buy my rulers? Trying to help. Just trying to help.
It's actually funny that you say that because my kids, I've got a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they're about old enough now that they kind of get some of the concept of what's there. A little younger than that, I can remember multiple times, we're talking about buying something and we're being, judicious parents and trying to make sure that we're not just running out and buying whatever comes across the shelf or looking at different things. And like, I can remember multiple times showing up at a family party and them being like, yeah, mom and dad said we can't buy this thing because we don't have enough money. And it's something like super simple that's like $10 or something. And it wasn't that we didn't have the money. It was that we were trying to decide like, do we actually need that or whatever? But the way they saw it is, well, why wouldn't you buy it? And so like that perfect representation. So I we don't have enough money. So would you buy my ruler that I just made?
Right.
What were these like crooked twigs too? Did you have like?
Well, the competitors were quite crooked. Mine were very straight.
Very straight.
I had the best twigs.
Yes, the best twigs and carved out and everything. I love that. And that was probably like 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Nice. Very nice. I think you've moved ahead in the world a little bit in the monetization of mental capital. Tell us a little bit about your journey coming to 2001 where you decided to dig in on the Amazon side.
Yeah, as a kid, I always loved learning, loved academia, loved sports, loved music, dug into everything. But I always, throughout that time, loved business too. And so had lots of little businesses in elementary and middle school and high school. I built a service company, home services business, and ended up selling that. And then in college, invested some of that money into real estate. And at that time, real estate was a very good business. And so did rental properties, a development of some land, a few projects like that, and became a realtor broker, did some fun commercial projects as well. But around 2001 was when I'd been watching e-commerce and realized there's a lot of opportunity here. Back then, if you remember, if you're around watching these things then, the dot-com bust had happened. And so a lot of people were actually giving up on e-commerce. It had just started. There's this big flash. Super Bowl ads were out there. Every random word plus com at the end was having a big Super Bowl ad. Then .com crashed. This is when Amazon was struggling and almost went bankrupt, and others were having the same problem. And then after that, slowly.
What year was that?
I think it was in 99.
99. So a good friend of mine, his name's Dimitri Verona. Have you met Dimitri yet?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so look back through. If you haven't met him yet, take a peek and ask me for an intro. Dimitri is a rock solid entrepreneur. Like, his episode, honestly, is actually really interesting to listen to. If you want to go back to another episode and listen, he talks about how he was connecting to the internet in New York, and he was frustrated because there wasn't a really good ISP in his area. And so he bought the big line to go into his apartment. And then he was actually like connecting other people to the point where he had like a whole bunch of people connecting out of his apartment. And he actually sold the dang thing to one of the big ISPs. And he was like, yeah, and then we had to find a warehouse that had a bunch of connections. And like, I mean, great story.
Awesome.
He talks about the same .com burst, and he was going to start like guitars.com or something like that. Like, it was this ginormous, did a full page ad in the newspaper, did nothing, crickets. And turned out he was just like 8 years too early or something.
Yeah, right.
Now there's like ginormous companies that are out there. And so we talked a lot about timing on his episode. So when you were describing that, like, this was the stage that was being set in terms of like lots of people struggling. And so literally 2 years after that, 2001, you're like, okay, no, I'm going to turn around and make this happen. I can remember, so I graduated high school in 2004. And so I can remember junior high to high school, some of those different pieces. I remember getting into college in 2005, and Amazon, like, that was the place. The funny thing was, I was like on the cutting edge. My mom figured out that she could buy most of my textbooks on Amazon and buy like the prior edition for like $15 instead of the $120 textbook that was out of the bookstore. And we figured out this hack where you could walk up to the teacher and say, hey, does last year's edition work? And he was like, yeah, you can use last year's edition. And we're like, cha-ching, just saved $110. Yeah. And then I would turn around and sell the book for $15, and it was basically like free textbooks. And I can remember like 4 or 5 textbooks sitting on a shelf, and my Amazon account, this was before they charged $39 a month for it, all that jazz. I can look back and I can see, a couple of sales for my textbooks. That was my first experience. And man, do I wish that I had thought, what if I sold other crap on here?
Right.
Because I've heard that back then it was like, I listed crap and it sold. I didn't even have to be good at finding stuff. It was just like whatever I put on the platform, it would sell back then. So tell me about the journey. 2001, you're getting into it. What did that look like?
Yeah, I will. And I'll comment generally on a few of the things that you brought up first, too. I think it's so interesting, the timing of getting into businesses. You mentioned the example with guitars, and we had so many considerations like that, too. Do we go broader? Do we go deeper, right? Our first product line was water filters, but there were all these other products we knew about. One of them was mattresses. And you talk about one of the opportunities that we're looking at the right time, actually, but didn't do something on it. It was mattresses because, we're seeing that you could actually get a mattress compressed in a certain type like Tempur-Pedic and at a fraction of the cost and ship them out. Or thinking, well, this is e-commerce ready, right? And so we were all fired up about this, and no one was doing it. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry and all, but we couldn't, in that case, we couldn't find the right source. The source we had was a bit shaky. So we weren't able to proceed on that. But, what happened? So we weren't committed enough to it to actually go find the right source. But we had other good things going on. It's always the question, what is the right time generally to be in the business? What is the right to go deeper or broader? And so for years, getting back to your question, for years, we really did focus and go deep in water filtration. So we became the best, the biggest, the best anywhere online for water filtration.
Interesting. So I love that topic of when to go broad or when to go deeper. I think that's a fantastic place for our episode to go here. So as an Amazon seller, let's imagine that I've launched a service and I've begun to find some initial success. And I find that a common thread across everyone that I've talked to is monetize mental capital. One of the hardest parts I have found in monetizing my own mental capital is because my product is intangible and is honestly very tied to what I am capable of achieving and or capable of conning someone else into doing for me, i.e. I find an Indian developer to make me an app or whatever else it is. If I'm good enough at sourcing people and connecting those dots, it's limitless. Like I could build anything. That is a superpower. And I found, like at the beginning, I thought, wow, superpower. Like I am a total rock star because I can make anything happen. So I would get on these calls with these potential clients and word of mouth would spread. And, oh, there's this guy I know and he does automation. Because that was my first foray into it. I started an automation agency and I pitched a guy who I had been working for, gained his trust. Actually, most people in this industry have either heard of him or heard of Seller Labs. Brandon Checkitts was the founder of Seller Labs. And this is in the heyday of Brandon Checkitts' Seller Labs because Snagshout was still a thing. And the review gaming on Amazon, like, you give somebody free product for leaving you a good review, well, an honest review. And, all of that was still happening. So he had money to throw around a little bit. And I pitched him on the idea of starting monetizing my mental capital of automating crap. And the way I convinced him to do it was I went out and I built myself basically an affiliate management system using Google Sheets and Google Tag Manager. So I figured out how to write cookies using JavaScript. And then I had the cookies connected to my spreadsheet and actually communicating back to my spreadsheet based on what was going on the site. And so I jerry-rigged a commission tracking system, didn't hire anybody else to go. There were some out there. And he was so impressed with my jerry-rigging that he was like, I bet he can automate stuff inside other businesses and make this work. That was my monetization of mental capital. Back
Very
to the
cool.
downfall, I could build anything, right? My clients would come to me and say, Will, I want to build this system where a text message comes in and da-da-da-da. And I would get so excited about their dream. We would dream together for an hour and we'd be like, how cool would the world be if what you just described existed? I was so sucked in by is this possible? Think Jurassic Park, right? I had a business partner who later, this is a year later, was like, well, I think we need to consider not can we, but should we? Going back to we were so infatuated with the possibility that we didn't think about the risks associated with creating dinosaurs that would eat us. Same situation on my projects. Did you see that as well? Your weakness was that you could do anything?
Yeah, I'm really good with the blank whiteboard, like you're talking about too, right? I'll get that thing going, fill it up. And I love working with blank whiteboards, but you can go anywhere, of course.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Or a broad whiteboard. So you've got to be careful. And what can be tough is if you don't know enough about the space, you don't know where to go, when to stop. And you do want to have that healthy balance between knowing what the rules are and knowing which rules to break. You can't just go out there and start breaking rules that you don't even know exist. It's good to kind of know what people are doing enough so you've got a reason you're breaking the rule deliberately, thinking, well, we're going to do it differently because we think it'll work better, et cetera, et cetera.
That's interesting.
Just shoot it from the hip. And yeah, so I think back then, to give an example, Wayfair, Needle were a couple of businesses that were going very, very broad. And we could have crushed it if we used our skills and just launched some new product lines. No doubt. I'd wondered if we should have. And in that case, probably we could have done that. Timing wise, it probably would have worked well. As those businesses got more mature, those industries got more mature, those product categories got more saturated, it would have been difficult, right? At that point, then we would have had to raise, $100 million and scale to billions fast. And am I the guy to scale to billions or not? It's then the question. I think in going deep and broad, that's one of the considerations. not just what is the cost benefit, like what can I build for value going broad versus what those two things look like, but also what will be required. How big does it need to go if I go deep? How big do I need to go if I go broad? And how fast do I need to get there? And then what does that look like? Do I need funding? Do I need partners? What is the landscape going to look like? And you talk about timing. What is the timing? Is this a 12-month thing? I've got to get in and get out, where there's going to be all these billion-dollar players jacking up the ads and lowering the price and everything else. So I think there's a lot of considerations in there when people are deciding, should I go deep or broad? Today for Amazon sellers, they have the same options, right? They've got a brand that's working pretty well. They've got some products that are working pretty well. It's something we deal with all the time in our service businesses now, which is helping people understand, should they go deep or broad, and should they go multi-channel? Should they go single channel? How should they look at these strategy options that they have in front of them? There's a lot of considerations.
So, okay, that's like multiple directions I could go there. I just looked up that quote. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think whether or not they should. And that's Jeff Goldblum's character, Malcolm, where they're in that lunch scene, and I can still see him in his black leather jacket. We're going to totally throw that meme in the show notes here. And I can remember so many projects where I should not have built that thing. Now, granted, building that thing that I should not have built taught me a lot of those rules I shouldn't break, and I wouldn't have known not to break them had I not broken them and lost some of that money. And so there's that whole idea of fail faster so that you can know where to go. What did you do when you began to monetize this service? When you began to find other people who were coming to you and saying, hey, I would like to do what you're doing. I would like to learn from you on how to do that. What ruler did you get out and say shouldn't, in terms of what sorts of services you would bring on?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the considerations that always has to be there is differentiation. So do I actually have something special? Because there's lots of people that can do this. And for example, now there are however many sellers there are on Amazon, there are at least that many agencies serving those sellers, right? I mean, it's not hard to be an Amazon agency. It's hard to be a differentiated value add Amazon agency or Amazon software provider like Seller Labs. You guys do something stage Amazon businesses and help them grow in a simple way. Like that makes sense. And so we have to do that too, where we play. And for us, we need to make sure we've got differentiation. We also need to make sure we've got the right team. And this is one of the things we spend a lot of time on in our coaching business, Brad's 10X, where we help business create the frameworks to long-term scalable, sustainable success. Okay. And as we help them with this, we help them think about what is the team they need to grow in a strong way, a predictable way. And there's lots of research on this we've brought in from our time at Harvard Business School, London Business School, YPO, EO, all the other resources that are out there with coaching, scaling up EOS, Metronome, OKRs, all these programs out there to bring in what is the perfect balance of personalities and skill sets, and to make sure that we're making good decisions should we not. Question that you raised. And so we need to have the visionary that's good at the whiteboard. We need to have the operator that's very, very good at getting some things done and getting some good momentum and moving fast. We also need someone that is a bit of a wet blanket that says, hold on here, let's make sure we stick with our systems. We do it in a scalable way. We've got enough bandwidth. It won't divert us. We take bite-sized chunks. We move methodically, things like this. And so if we've got that right mix, now we can make some great decisions. Businesses die when they have an improper balance of those things. But if we've got the right mix, we will have some good synergy. We'll refine the product offering. We'll refine the service offering. We will refine the way we package it. We'll refine the way we create the business model and monetize it so that it is both good for the customer, the partner, and ourselves.
What you said there, it encapsulates a lot of amazing things. And I love the different roles that you brought out there. Like, get enough of the right people in the room that you've got a wet blanket who's saying, hey, I don't know if this is the right move for us to make, but you're also kind of connecting that dots. That makes me think of Patrick Lencioni's framework of the 6 working geniuses, which is another one of those frameworks out there that helps us kind of describe the idea of launching a business or a project. And he talks about those 6 working geniuses starting with wonder and then going to invention. So like wonder, should we even build X, Y, or Z? Or is this, what problems should be solved? and then getting into what are the ways we could solve it. That's invention. And then which of those ways is the best way? That's discernment. So wonder, invention, discernment, and then galvanizing people. So getting people excited about moving in the direction that is chosen by the discerner. That's galvanizing. And then getting to supporting the people through that process. That's enablement. And then the final in tenacity, which is where we actually finish all of the parts of the process. And his tenet is you only come with 2 of those as your working genius. And then you have 2 that you're a working frustration and 2 that are a working competency. That's his whole framework. So wonder, invention, galvanizing, enablement. I missed one. Wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and then tenacity. So those are the 6 working geniuses. I 100% agree with you. I think that a lot of times those visionaries who are good at the blank whiteboard, those guys either have wonder or invention in their back pocket. That's the thing that they love, that blank whiteboard. And I'm similar. I love that blank whiteboard. My working frustration is discernment. That's one of the solid, like I just really, really stink, and tenacity. I don't like finishing things, and I don't like choosing which of my ideas is the good one.
They're all good.
If you ask me, they're all good, which is why I have all the capacity to kind of figure out where to go next. So what if I'm alone? What if I don't have a business partner to slot into some of these other roles? And maybe I'm even on the other side of the fence. I'm pretty good. My intuition's good on which idea is going to go well, but I lack the idea. Right. I don't know what I could even solve or where to go with that. Like some piece of my equation is missing. If I'm alone, how do I find someone else? Or is there a substitute that I could find that isn't necessarily someone else that might help me get past some of these roadblocks?
Yeah, I like the question. And I think there's a reason that Silicon Valley more often than not invest in duos or trios of founders and not just a sole entrepreneur who has so many blind spots. So if you can get that right mix, the odds of success are much greater. If someone is a solo entrepreneur and they don't even have an advisory board, it'll be tough if they don't have the right parts. I think ways to solve for it are things like an advisory board or advisors, generally coaches, systems like this. And, I'll admit, I did not know about these for the first over 10 years. And there's so many fantastic options out there that were eventually such a great help to me. But the problem then becomes they're expensive, right? And so these coaches are $100,000 a year. Advisory board, if you do it right, it could be $150,000 plus stock options. Like this isn't cheap, but somehow we need to solve for getting that balance, people that can help us and push back. So we get the right frameworks for making decisions. We get the right people that can push back, the right processes for making decisions, and advisors to kind of keep the train on the track a little bit and to help avoid tons of wasted time. I mean, when people are looking at, should we hire a $100,000 coach or a $150,000 advisory board and giving stock to advisors, things like that. Typically entrepreneurs, their first answer is, well, my main problem is just time. I don't need more ideas. I need more time. But they often miss, I did, that the time is the problem, but not in the way they think. They are using time inefficiently. They're not prioritizing well enough. They're going down rabbit holes, like the examples we're talking about today, and creating a dinosaur accidentally. And a good advisor or framework that helps them say, no, actually, dinosaur is not a good idea right now. Maybe never, but maybe right now for sure it's not a good idea. Then it avoids tons of wasted time, tons of wasted money, and that's what we need.
So I'm alone again, right? Like I'm alone. I don't have $150,000 to buy a coach. I don't even have $1,000 a month to throw at a coach. What do you do to figure out? And I'll throw out 2 things that I did, but I'm curious if what you did to find this out. One, I failed miserably. I just tried. So trying and failing was actually fairly effective at learning to do some of those different things. I learned that I could avoid some of those mistakes when I started bringing in those mentors. And I found them in 2 ways. One, I went and found other business owners who were facing the same challenges I was, or were facing similar challenges, who complimented me. So this is someone who I would run into and say, wow, we're similar in a lot of ways, but really, I think you might be that wet blanket. You're running your own business and this other piece. In another life, we probably will build a business together. I can see that if I were to have a weekly call with you, you might be able to call me on some of my blind spots. And maybe I can call you on some of yours as well. And so one of the ways that I did it is I did weekly phone calls with other business owners. where we would trade time. There was no money exchange at all. And I would find somebody else who wanted to start a service-based business, or I would find somebody who was in an adjacent business. We would become friends and we would just call each other on our crap to look at it. And so it became like a free consulting arrangement between the two of us, because I would tell them what I was facing. They would call me on my crap and vice versa. And I found the best ones, the ones that were most effective, when it was what I was finding my opposite. If I found somebody who was just like me, we got on and commiserated. And sometimes they even would tell me something that would validate my thinking in the wrong direction because they weren't my opposite. So finding someone, another business owner, your opposite, just, hey, this call went really well. I got a lot out of it. Hope you did too. Maybe let's set up a call once a week or every other week. That was one way that I found free advisors. But it wasn't free because I had to spend my time helping them as well. The second thing that I did was I found that there were several mastermind or Slack groups that were free that I could get into and ask questions. And often they had like an upgrade option where I paid like $125 a month to be in a mastermind or a small group. And that was the first place that I began to find a group of people who I could sit on the hot seat and tell them my challenges. And they would say, oh, I had to do that. And this is what I tried. I think the upgraded version of that is you then pick whichever one's telling you the advice that's working the most and say, hey, can I engage you for $500 a month for a call every other week or that sort of thing to connect those thoughts. But I totally agree. What have you done when you're in that alone stage to create that ruler to decide, should I / could I? How to get past the excitement of that's possible to what should I measure this against?
Early on, we hired strong employees, and they were the ones that we used at that time. And it can be effective, but you've got to remember that if you're hiring someone, oftentimes, typically, no matter how smart they are, no matter how good they are, they have to also be good at saying no. And they have to be experienced,
especially to your boss.
Right. Experienced enough, confident enough, wise enough to know when to do that, how to do it. And that's hard. That's rare. And typically that comes in a C-suite type level that they're going to want 200 grand, 300 grand and upside, things like that. And so that is difficult. One thing that, I love what you did, by the way. I think it's great. It can get you somewhere for sure. I think what was important to us is not just having a peer group. A peer group's great and it's super helpful. I think those are fantastic. Do that. But I think we also want to make sure we're getting people on our team that have done what we want to do, and not just their peers, but have really done it. And most of the people that have done that are good at things like monetizing mental capital. And so they don't always just want to do it for free. But this is one of the hurdles that people eventually understand. It took me a while, but eventually I understood that, but it's worth it. It's actually worth paying them. Like, these guys are really good. There's a reason they're worth that money. There's a reason people pay them that money. They've done it multiple times. They can help people. It's worth it. I can buy the book and try to do a few things and put some duct tape here and there and do something. But if I can get them, it's a lot easier. And so we did it the expensive way, typically. As I mentioned, a lot of these things were the expensive way. So we got the dedicated advice too. That's the other downside with a peer group, is you don't get dedicated advice. You're going around like kind of an idea here or there, but do you really have a dedicated coach or dedicated advisory board? Typically, it's hard to do. Even in peer advisory groups that are fantastic, like YPO or EO or some of those, we've got a dedicated forum. They're dedicated to each other, not to you. So it's fantastic, but you're still missing things. So this kind of led us, actually, which might be one of your questions, but this led us to understand really what people need is maybe a entry-level way to tap into some of this advice. It's kind of a mix of an advisory board and peer advisors, but for a low cost. And then beyond that, they kind of like use the word upgrade. I mean, upgraded version is to have, these sophisticated frameworks and systems and dedicated coaching, but in a way that's still accessible and affordable. And so that's what we ended up having to solve for, because so many of the companies that we're working with would hit a ceiling eventually. They would have a brilliant idea, brilliant product, brilliant brand, whatever. And then eventually they hit a ceiling, just like we all have, because they didn't have access to all these things yet.
Interesting. So in that moment of trying to figure out how to solve for that ceiling in a scalable way, it sounds like you may have created some coaching programs for those different businesses that you were starting.
Right. So the clients that we've had on the agency side or the partners in our brands, they can partner. one of the ways we work with people, just to give you a little bit of context, is not to just be a typical agency or typical 3PL, but to partner up in a way where we actually can run the business and they can focus on creating a product and having differentiators and creating value. And they don't need to spend millions of dollars and tons of time building the infrastructure. So that's one of the ways we partner. But what people are doing that, they are really bringing in a partner and wanting to, they do give up some risk and reward for good or bad, but some people want to build their own thing, of course, and not bring on partners in that way, but they do need some of the systems, some of the frameworks to do this. So what we did, over the years spent, definitely into 7 digits with hiring coaches, bringing the systems and platforms. Like I mentioned, some of those, a lot of things that they brought back from Harvard Business School or London Business School, or some of the programs from YPO and EO, but more from the coaching systems like EOS, Traction, Scaling Up, PRs, Measure What Matters, those types of systems that really help businesses, entrepreneurs, SMBs, and mid-market companies run a good, sophisticated business where we do have the right balance, not too much infrastructure, but enough infrastructure, not just that could balance. So we brought all these in and took the best of all the pieces and applied it to multi-channel distribution that's focused on e-commerce, but multi-channel e-commerce, and then helping people get offline too. So it truly is multi-channel. So we brought in the systems, packaged in a way that hits multi-channel for that target, which is our target, the people we work with, and then do it in a way that's affordable and accessible. The way we realized we could do it is to have like group coaching, and then we can break off and have additional one-on-ones at the right time. But we provide the frameworks, and then we have group coaching and another one-on-one option. So people can get what we did for hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, perhaps, for a fraction of that price, or 80-90% of the value, plus the added value of the pure advisors too. So that seems to be solving the problem.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, so shifting to another question that I always like to ask in the episode. Let's imagine that you could give a call back to Jamin as he's beginning his journey in deciding monetization of mental capital. He's learned the ruler lesson. He's gone through those different pieces. Let's imagine that you could give him a call at a point when he's mature enough to receive your advice and also is willing to listen. What piece of advice would you give him that might help him scale up his ability to monetize mental capital more quickly?
Yeah, I think I did not know what I didn't know, just like everyone, I guess, who's ever been born. And so I got to the point where I was really missing out. And it wasn't until 2009, I think, when we won our first Inc. 500 award, like 300 or in the 300s or something like that, where I got together with all these people and realized, man, there's so many amazing people that have done so much more than me so many times. I really should connect with them. And so connecting with those people opened my eyes that I do need advisors. I do need coaches. I do need all of this. And
that was the point at which you were like, okay, it's time to actually hire somebody. There really are people who are worth the money. Paying really would help me switch/move faster.
Exactly. So I was open to learning. I was always, passionate about learning. It wasn't that I didn't want to learn. I just didn't know where to go and that it was worth paying. Those are the things that I didn't know. And so now, there's so many folks that have developed, it sounds like your audience has developed some fantastic skills and capabilities. And, we have coaches in our program that have those skills that want to start deploying those types of skills and can do that. And there are others that need them and hopefully realize they can get a whole lot of value, just like I did back in the day when we're able to find the right people and willing to pay what they're worth.
Beautiful. So your piece of advice would be get out there, find someone who's done what you want to do before and pay them whatever's necessary. So how do you make sure that you hire the right one?
It's a good question. If you can start with a relationship and test small and that kind of thing, if you can understand specifically that they have done what you want to do, it helps. That's why, we do what we do too. When I was on the other side of the table, I wanted to test and try things and learn a little bit to make sure they were the right person. We try to make sure we do that as well. And I think that's part of it. If you can find someone that's willing to talk and share a few things, and in that conversation, ensure that they understand what you're talking about and can add a little value and can make you think differently. You don't want to go to these people. I think this is helpful advice, probably. A lot of these folks, they may want to talk to someone and have the quick answer to 10 times their business. They do 10 times their business. Quick, you got 30 seconds. And it's not Like no one can do that well. And if someone gives you an answer on that, they're the wrong person for sure. But if you've got someone that will ask you questions to challenge yourself, then you've got the right person. And on the flip side, if a coach has a student that wants to be challenged and ask difficult questions and values like, oh, actually, that's an interesting perspective. I didn't look at it that way. That was a blind spot for me. Those are the people that I love to work with. And that way still, I keep hiring coaches, to be clear. And I've got to have that mentality when I'm a student for whatever area I am. Like Tiger Woods has a coach. Serena Williams always had a coach. They need to be inquisitive and thinking about how can I break through and willing for the answer, willing to test things.
Let's say that you have someone like that in mind, done what you're doing. You're very confident they've faced the challenges you're currently facing. They've already exited a business that's like that. And you think personality wise, they're going to match up. You just reach out and say, hey, do you do one-on-one coaching? Do you reach out and say, hey, I'd love to pay you $500 for a couple hours of your time? Like, what's the right way to approach someone to not be off-putting and looking at that sort of situation?
There's lots of ways to get advice. Also, before you think about how to go about finding the person, you need to figure out what you're solving for, what your objective is. So there are different things. There's coaches, there's mentors, there's programs where you can learn and apply a program. There's peer advisory groups. There's lots of ways to get advice or masterminds. There's all these different areas. So you want to figure out, what are you solving for? Do you want an occasional tip? Do you want a shoulder to cry on, a group to celebrate with? Do you want to have someone that's been there that's going to coach you to be a more effective leader? Do you want to go from an entrepreneur to a CEO? If so, you might want, more of a system and platform so you can build something scalable. Are you really scaling and you want a dedicated advisory board that you're willing to really pay for and have people really hone in on your business?
Would you say that like inviting them to be on the advisory board kind of situation? Like if you've got someone in mind who's done that exit, is the advisory board like, hey, I'd like to invite you to be on my advisory board?
I think it's a good option. Again, I'm trying to first help people understand what they're solving for. So if they're generally saying, I want someone to kind of keep me out of trouble, they've been where I want to go. And yeah, they probably want a mix of an advisor and a system of coaching. So that's ultimately where I landed. I mean, I get the other stuff too, the peer advisory and masterminds and all that stuff too. But I think it's good to have advisors. You need that. And you need to have some type of platform, some system to help operate your business, some management system.
EOS or something else, some other system that way.
Yeah. Ours is Brands 10X. All of these are good though. EOS, Brands 10X, all these are good. I think the important part is you get one and you implement the best way you can. And then on the advisory board, I think
it sounds like there's three things you need. One, an operating system. Two, there's three ways to solve. One, you need an operating system. Two, you need the advisory board kind of situation. And sometimes you can find all those together to kind of connect those dots. Would you just start Googling to try to find like in your industry? Or how would you go about, obviously, if they're e-commerce sellers and they're wanting to build their brands, that sounds like something you guys are doing, some peer advisory board and some advisory board and some systems to help them kind of connect those different dots. If they're wanting to start something that wasn't necessarily in your category, where would you go?
Yeah, I mean, Google's always good. I mean, I think you want to look for these coaching systems to help make sure you've got a way to operate effectively. So Google that, talk to people that have found it. And there hasn't really been that in our space, which is why we felt moved to create it instead of just use something that was already there.
Define your space. What
multi-channel retail, which is now predominantly including digital and e-commerce means.
Got it. So in the multi-channel retail space, you didn't really find a fantastic peer advisory / framework / advisory board solution. And that's what you guys have built. So I love that. So interestingly enough, just for anybody who's listening, this was not planned, that this became like a very interesting pitch for Jamin's business in terms of the discussion. Jamin mentioned that he had some solutions around this and some of the thoughts around those different pieces. But this is a challenge I'm facing as I build my service-based business. And so hearing the way that we measure and look at that, I think that's fascinating and very cool. Final couple of questions. So find that peer advisory board, find that framework that's the right framework to build for your business, or look at that. So if I'm Googling around, kind of looking at those other places, you didn't find one that was perfect for your industry. Any other tips that you'd give about finding individuals like that?
There are plenty of systems out there, and a lot of them can work fine in a lot of industries. You can customize them and make them work. So anything is better than nothing, I would say. Pick one, and if it's the wrong one, it's okay. You'll make great progress with the wrong one too. So I would say just pick one and go with it. Back when I was starting a business, I wouldn't have said it at the time, but I suppose I made Jamin operating system, right? Management operating system. The best I could, right? Anytime I heard an idea for managing something better, I'd plug it in and we'd add that. We'd improve our systems, and we kept improving it. But it wasn't until I was exposed to some of these existing systems, like, oh, wow, that's way better. I should have done that. Like, okay, now I can leapfrog where I was headed. And so everyone does this, right? You've got your own systems. Everyone's got their own systems, but there's a reason these coaching businesses for these systems are a massive industry. It's because it works. And to build out some way to manage your business, it doesn't have to be super long-term commitment necessarily with these folks, but you get in there, you build the system, and you can decide if you want to keep going or not. But it's a big help to get something, anything.
Love it. I love it. Okay. Final couple of questions for the episode. You've given the advice to him around it is worth paying someone to help you implement this stuff. Do not be afraid to do that. It will accelerate your ability to lock in and move those different things forward. That's a powerful piece of advice. Now, we're going to give you 1 minute where you stepped into an elevator and the guy next to you is like, yeah, I'm an 8-figure Amazon seller. What do you do? So you're going to have 1 minute to tell this 8-figure seller what you do. And then right after that, we want you to share any tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that have helped you monetize your mental capital. So stepped into the elevator, and next to you turns over and says, hey, I'm an 8-figure Amazon seller. What do you do?
We try to help 7 and 8-figure, to be clear, sellers scale in a sustainable way. And we do this by helping provide the frameworks and the expertise so they can more predictably and reliably create strategies that work with the right differentiation and the systems that work so they can have the best execution.
Beautiful. Got like another 30 seconds there. How can they reach out if they're interested in connecting?
You can, Brands 10X is probably the best way, brands10x.com. And we've got my information there. My LinkedIn's great too. The jaminarvig.com goes to my LinkedIn page. Happy to chat with people that are passionate about learning and coachable and wanting to grow, or people that have a lot of expertise and want to be great coaches as well. I think I've got a passion for learning and a passion for sharing and learning together.
Love it. Tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that have helped you monetize your mental capital.
All right. Yeah. One thing I'm hearing about more with some friends and thinking about more is stoicism at the moment. So I don't know if it's a tip and trick to monetizing mental capital directly, but it is a great way to live, great way to think, great way to operate. So I think there's some good things there that can keep an entrepreneur very balanced. Entrepreneurs, like myself, admittedly, tend to be very optimistic. And then when a hurdle comes, you're like, man, another hurdle. And so some of the ways of thinking that come with stoicism can kind of set you up for a little bit more success emotionally and mentally to make sure you can be a sustainable entrepreneur. So that's a good one. Probably not directly a tip and trick and hack for monetizing, but a good way of living and thinking.
Beautiful. I love it. Jamin, thank you so much for joining us on Monetizing Your Mental Capital. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.